When glancing superficially at the Loess area during the scorching summer, it seems dismal and lifeless. Though in the winter and springtime, one cannot remain indifferent to the sight of magnificent flowering meadows covering what was once bare sand dunes. The Loess Plains makes up an important ecosystem that, along with other systems, define Israel's unique character. Loess started accumulating in our region approximately 70,000 years ago, beginning in the last ice age until 10,000 years ago. This region is a frontier area, connecting the Mediterranean terrain with the desert terrain. In biogeographic terms, this kind of an area is defined as an ecotone, an ecological community at the edge of its distribution, and therefore carries a unique genetic load of edge population, very important to conserve. Indeed, the biodiversity that characterizes Loess consists of endemic organisms and an ecosystem based on biogenic soil membranes as primary producers and important environmental engineers. The proper functioning of this thin layer rests on a fascinating interplay between inanimate soil grains and living organisms. This is the Hemilepistus reamuri, an isopod that lives in Loess habitats and feeds on soil membranes. This isopod is prey for many species of insectivores in the desert environment, and is a key species in the desert environment because it reduces soil salinity levels. Although archaeological findings and historical records indicate a human presence on the Loess Plains for thousands of years, the ecosystem has been severely damaged only in recent centuries, and even more so in recent decades. Let's take sheep herding, for example. This human activity has been part of the ecosystem of the northern Negev since Neolithic periods, which led to an evolutionary species selection process in plants. However, overgrazing, which started during the Ottoman rule, did not allow the plants to adapt to the new conditions, which led to a loss of ecosystem functions and services in the Loess areas. But this is only the beginning of the Loess soil's difficult period. In the following years, development work, which was followed by the building of towns and villages and infrastructure by the State of Israel, led to some radical changes in the region. This development included the agricultural communities of Eshkol and Hevel Shalom regional councils. The modern agricultural activity of these communities, unlike traditional dryland farming, was based on the use of shaftad water, and this, in turn, increased land drift and land salination, as well as the accumulation of toxins in the natural ecosystems. The establishment of these Jewish-Israeli communities in the 20th century changed the nature of the Bedouins' population settlement pattern, a change that has had significant impact on the ecosystem. Due to the scattered nature of the Bedouin communities and the small agricultural areas adjacent to them, the contract lines of these communities with their surrounding environment are quite vast in comparison to their size, and therefore their overall influence on nature is greater. The native flora and fauna were pushed further to the south and west to less damaged natural remains. The proliferation of invasive and synanthropic species have overwhelmed the local species. For example, the crested lark has pushed out the local species, the smaller desert lark, and the caracal has been pushed away by the jungle cats that have settled near the water reservoirs in the area. Following the International Union for Conservation of Nature's recommendation, it was decided to protect 10% of the area of the Loess Plains so as to ensure the continuity of this ecosystem. This is why the Shdemot Habsor Nature Reserve was created, with the aim of creating statutory protection of nature in precious and important Loess areas. Here in this unique reserve, which was established on the lands of Mala, the Center for Urban Combat Training, we are now witnessing the return of nature in all its glory. The restored Loess soil is reproducing its rich ecological diversity. This is the greater Egyptian jerboa, a medium-sized rodent whose hind legs are 3 times longer than its front legs, so that it can leap and avoid contact as much as possible with the hot sand. Next to the jerboa, we can see a cluster of Judean irises, one of the most beautiful and magnificent plants in Israel and the Middle East. The disintegration of the concrete here has already begun, but it will take many more years until the entire area of the reserve returns to being Loess Plains. Meanwhile, The dilapidated buildings create ecological niches that did not exist there in the past, such as shady and hidden areas where large animals can hide. These may result in an evolutionary selection process in the composition of plant and animal species, just as thousands of years of moderate grazing did in the past. A nimble Beersheba fringe-fingered lizard is leading us as it runs to a family of fennec foxes, which, after dark, will go on their nocturnal trip in search of their dinner, the leftovers of which will be kept in their den for the next day, just like us, humans. This is where our program ends. Next week, we will review the revival of the Dead Sea, the equally intriguing area of death.